Today we have a very special guest, Chandrashekhar Tibrewal, who was a great student leader in Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi in late 70s and early 80s. He moved to US in 1987, and since then he has worked for various organizations and corporations. But in his own right, he also has always followed his political ambition, political opinion, I should say very strong political opinion. So today we are going to talk to him about Indian Prime Minister Modi's visit to United States and rally to welcome him. And Tibrewal has his own counterpoint about his visit and the entire organizations. So Tibrewal, thank you very much for coming to our studio.
Thank you for
and
having
welcome
me.
here, and very happy to have you here. Once we talk about Prime Minister Modi, we'll talk about JNU as well, so be ready for that.
Sure.
So, first thing I want to ask you is that as we have seen on the television, in the media, and people talking about that Prime Minister Modi's visit was really an astounding success here. And he galvanized the Indian community, people in India. So what do you think overall about his visit to US?
Well, I think the visit, definitely on the face of it, went off really, really well. Particularly when we understand the backdrop. And the backdrop is that we have someone for Prime Minister who followed after Vajpayee and Manmohan Singh. Neither of them could speak. I mean, we had two leaders for combined, 15 years?
15 years.
Who basically had no statesman-like quality, at least when it came to public presentation. And we know the circumstances of Modi's victory in India. So, and of course, the apparatus that he has available to him, we know now that we had a good machinery from the US that actually conducted his campaign in India. So we have a fairly sophisticated organization.
Now, you said something very interesting. What do you mean by he has his own machinery in the United States?
So the support base, so for the years that I've lived here, I know that there is, for example, I used to live in Long Island, and there was a group out of Staten Island which are actually led by one particular doctor who supported the Bharatiya Janata Party and the VHP and rallied a lot of money. But I think there is a sizable following there. So there's a fair number of BJP supporters in this country who obviously but also very strong, have been supporters of Modi. So if you look at the last 8-10 years when he was denied the visa, there has been a very sizable group that has tried getting them, getting him basically on a conference call, video call. So we know that Modi has conducted many meetings sitting in India because he was physically not allowed to come in.
Sure.
There were obviously other people who had managed to keep him out. He was supposed to come, I guess, last year or sometime to UPenn, and that eventually got cancelled because you had a bunch of intellectuals who opposed it. But what I mean by group of people, so obviously there is a vast number of people, and I don't know what the numbers may be, but people who have the money, and which is evidenced by the fact that his meeting, the big rally at Madison Square Garden, as you know, cost at least $1.5 million, if not more. I mean, that's what I've seen in the news media, and that was obviously funded by private.
So what are the issues which you have? What are the three issues you have with the rally at Madison Square?
No, so I think it was a great rally, and so there are two takes on this. So from as a person of Indian origin, obviously I like the fact that you have all these people chanting for the Prime Minister of India. My issues are, my major issue is the way it got organized. So if you notice, it was not done under the auspices of Government of India. So as I would like to say it, it was done by people of Modi,
sure, and
not people of India. So when I say people of India, I would have wanted to see it organized by the Indian consulate or the Indian embassy. I know from a not-for-profit group that essentially the way it was sold to organization was, all organizations, basically not-for-profit organizations in the US, is that this is a great opportunity for you to get tickets for your members to see the Prime Minister in person. But we will only give those tickets through you. You will have to register with us, and then you will provide a code to your members. They have to go online, and then that's how they will actually get it. And it was a long email of 6 or 7 points, but essentially it told the organization that you have to agree that whatever seats you take, spaces you take, you must fulfill, nothing should go wasted. So it was cleverly designed, and in my opinion, for many organizations, I think they were. I mean, dupe is a strong word which I have used on one of my Facebook.
That was my next question.
My Facebook page. But I think, in my perception, a lot of them were duped into this because it was presented to people. Like, you see the Republicans do it all the time, or some of the big political organizations which present this to people in a certain fashion. Because obviously the pride of being able to see the Prime Minister face to face.
So now, before you go, I have one more question for you. You said that the people of India and people of Modi, you differentiate between these two?
Sure.
Why?
Because obviously, when the Prime Minister is visiting a country, Prime Minister is here in multiple capacities. Of course, he's an official visit. But if the organization is not by the Prime Minister's office or by a government organization, then obviously it's people of Modi, because the end game is what? The end game is to project. So the Modi's game right now is to project an image that he was hugely successful in the US. Obviously, when you have Madison Square Garden filled out with people, it is actually gives you big bragging rights.
Sure.
So my concern is that if you look at the way the email was sent out, everyone who registered, and I did not go to see him, but I'm on that list because I belong to an organization that was actually given the access to these seats, which means they have my email address. Which means that now they have all these, in their database, they have a bunch of people who they can actually target for various promotions or whatever it is,
Explain this a little bit. I know that you lived for a long time in New York, New Jersey, and also you were involved with several organizations. You started one of them there, and New York and New Jersey organization played actually a very key role in all this Madison Square rally. So tell me a little bit about that, how it involves the email database and how the organizations were, to use your word, duped to give the emails of their members.
So obviously, once it is presented, the way it was presented to organization was this: that we have the Prime Minister of India is here. We are giving you this great opportunity that your members actually can attend a meeting, and this meeting, only people who can go there who belong to one of these organizations. So people were not able to go and get seats from anywhere else. I'm sure behind the scene, the Indian consulate or embassy may have had some seats of their own because they would have worked behind the scene. But organizations were essentially told that we will give you this, but on the condition that we give us access to your database. Because I'm assuming that's what happened, because I belong to one of these organizations in New Jersey. I did not ask for a ticket. I did not wish to go for this. But I got an email basically, telling me about this, and basically I was given the code, and I think, if I remember correctly, I even had an email. And what is the name? Do you know the name of the organization? I forget, but the organization that was the main organizer of this, I think, was originally set up. I think there was a gentleman Zutsi, but who is not involved now. There was some other name, Dr. Barai, I think.
Barai, yes, Bharat Barai.
Bharat Barai, right. So I don't know any of these individuals individually, but essentially what I'm saying is that they actually have access by an organization registering if that organization has 400 members, then they have access to the 400 emails. So you multiply that by, I believe if you go to Dr. Barai's organization website, you probably will see a list of all the supporting organizations. So these organizations now are being shown supporting this organization. Initially, they were told that they were friends of the welcome committee. I do not know what they call themselves eventually. But the perception is, and which is what they have created. If you look at the media, if you look at the New York Times report, everyone is calling it a huge success. And it was a success from a pure number perspective. But I have problems in the manner in which it got organized. If money was a constraint, $1.5 million it cost to go to Madison Square Garden, and if government of India did not want to foot the bill, we do a number of things in India nowadays between private and public enterprise.
Sure.
Indian embassy could have been the organizer of the event. I'm very sure if they called 3 rich people that they know, they would have easily footed the bill.
Sure.
So which is why I suspect the intent behind the manner in which it was organized, and time will tell, what becomes of it.
So, what do you think that how it was covered by media? And I'm talking about, if you can talk a little bit about how the U.S. media covered it and how the Indian media covered it. Do you see any difference? For
what I follow, the U.S. media was initially slow to pick up on this. So in the first 2 days, from the Facebook comments, I saw people were saying that Indian media is so gaga about Modi's popularity, and the U.S. media is not doing very much. But I think, to be fair, New York Times did pick up quite a bit of this, and eventually updated on the day of the event in Madison Square Garden. Later in the day, they actually updated, and they called it a success. They talked about the fact that they had 18,000 plus people. They call it a raucous welcome, or whatever the terminology was. The Indian media, of course, Indian media is a different story. I mean, that will take an hour of discussion because
just briefly, like.
But Indian media obviously has seen a big shift. So Indian media has gone from being anti-Modi up until, let's say, 6 months before the election, before Modi won, to almost blindly pro-Modi. So Hindu is one newspaper that I used to read fairly often online, and I've seen a big shift in Hindu where even they have changed their personnel. Some of the people, one of our friends from JNU, Sainath, who was I think their rural editor or whatever he was called, he wrote big pieces. He was the guy who actually exposed this whole thing, the farmer suicide and all that. He's well-known Magsaysay Award winner and all that. So he got edged out by Hindu, and I think it's post-Modi politics has caused all that to happen. So Indian media is, at this point in time, Indian media is going gaga over whatever Modi does.
Yes.
So I am waiting to see what happens 6 months or a year from now, when the dust settles, when we see the outcome of the 2 by-elections in India later this year. So I'm just curious to see where it shapes.
Now, another question for you is that given the history of Modi when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat and all these allegations with communal rights and all this stuff, and now what we have seen, maybe change Modi, a new Modi, that he was able to win this election with a landslide, I should say. Do you, as a person, as a Chandrashekhar Tibrewal, do you have that trust and faith in Modi as far as other ethnic groups in India are concerned?
No, I don't. You see, the thing is, because when you look, Modi himself, obviously, from what you hear, has apparently told people to not play the communal politics, at least for the first 5 years of his term or during the first phase of this BJP rule. But if you look at what is happening in terms of their pronouncement, whether it's love jihad or whatever stuff that you see over and over again. And when I look at some of my own friends, a lot of our friends from JNU have, in their current years of life, as we have all aged, many of them have become BJP, to my surprise. But when I look at their personal Facebook pages, I see a lot of venom. They don't directly attack the Muslims, but every other story that they post is about some Muslim atrocity or some bad thing that Muslims are doing somewhere or the other. So it's not even that implicit. I think, I don't think that part of it is gone. Now, what I think is maybe changing is that since he's the Prime Minister of India, he obviously needs to carry the country as a whole. So there is seemingly an attempt for him to obviously not verbalize any of that stuff. But I do not know if BJP will walk away. If you look at Subramaniam Swamy, if you look at BJP's political agenda, if you go to their website, only good thing I'll say is this: BJP talks about their philosophy being cultural nationalism. So at least on their website, they don't call it a Hindu cultural nationalism, but cultural nationalism, as we know, to them means Hindu cultural nationalism. And if that continues to be an agenda, then BJP cannot be trusted with minorities, and there's a great fear in India.
So if I am a secular Muslim, should I be concerned? Should I be worried?
People should be worried. People should rally. People should definitely keep the pressure on. But this is what I'll tell you. There are some Muslim friends of ours. I mean, there is a great friend of mine who lives in Gujarat, and is a Muslim friend of mine from JNU, who currently at this point in time, actually, he wants to give Modi a fair chance. So he says that let's wait and see how it plays out in the next 1 year. By the same token, though, there are others that I know who are fearful. They don't know where it will shape. So some people think that Muslims are very scared, and they will say yes to a number of things because they do not know what will become of them. But I think they should be fearful to the extent that they should continue to stay organized. They should continue to support the secular forces in the country to keep the party on its toes. I mean, my wish is, if you go by who has become BJP, I mean, half of the people in any political party in India were people who all came from the Congress anyway. So the point is, if these people can be put onto a secular path, they will do well for the country. I have no doubts. But my worry is that they cannot survive without the RSS, and RSS will not ever give up the.
Now we saw that when Mr. Modi was here in the US, no doubt about it, and I think everybody believes that the Indian community or Indian diaspora, you can say, they really rallied behind him, a vast majority of them. What should be their role as we move to the next phase of a Modi government? Should they be careful, watchful in terms of giving the Modi's background and the BJP involvement and Vishwa Hindu Parishad involvement into this?
Firstly, I don't know what percentage of Indians here are supporting Modi. That's a difficult thing to gauge because obviously, I mean, you know, we have how many? 4 million plus people in the country as a whole.
Slightly more than 3 million.
Yeah. So, and obviously you have 18,000 people there. I don't know if you look at the Indian support for Democrats versus Republicans, you still have a larger number of Indians supporting Democrats and not Republicans. Given that BJP is right wing, so are the Republicans. So I do not know politically how many Indians will really be supportive of BJP per se. Obviously, there is a youthfulness, though. Obviously, so the younger generation seems to have support of Modi. In my perception, still largely because of the fact that we had a very ineffective government in the last 5 years, particularly. So the UPA 2 was disaster.
Sure.
So I think time will tell, but I think I personally still do not see that this is a unequivocal shift to Modi. I think people will wait and see. Of course, people here, obviously, you know, if you look at some of the early stuff that I heard from Modi's speech, I'll want to admit that I did not hear the whole speech, but I heard part of it. And he was saying things to appease the Indians by saying that, you know, we have made sure that, you know, you have PIO and OCI card are being merged into one. Now, of course, that to me was not a good thing to say because that definitely was not a Modi initiative. That was something that was approved by the previous government. I know that because I got an OCI card only last year and I was told that last year that the two were going to merge. So if I was in his shoes, I would actually give credit to the previous ones for what they have done, and obviously whatever initiative he's taking, whether it's visa on arrival and so on and so forth. But obviously I'm assuming as Indians we tend to be much more political, which means we as overseas Indians should not be looking purely after our own self-economic interest as living here, but we should be still caring for the country as a whole. And hence, I think a secular agenda should still be the major agenda. And we know that all studies have proven that secularism also, you know, causes growth. So obviously secularism is needed not merely to treat people as equal, but also purely for economic development perspective.
Now let us switch gear to JNU. And in JNU, of course, you were very active in the student politics. You headed the freethinkers group, which few years later I headed that too. And it was fun. We had a lot of political discussion, awareness in the campus, and it was a fantastic time. I know you are very much in touch with a lot of those students from our time and our colleagues here, and you organize every other year reunion of the first 2 decades of JNUites. So have you seen any, and now actually before I move to that question is that many of our colleagues from that time, now they are active in the government, they are elected officials, many of them are journalists, many of them are in the Indian Foreign Service. So what is your message today to them?
Well, firstly, I hope you know that the current ambassador of India to the US is a JNUite.
Yeah, actually he was in our hostel, Kaveri.
Yeah, and he was actually a leading member of the Freethinkers. He was one of the founders of the Freethinkers.
Okay, well, that I didn't know.
So, you know, and actually, I think the number 2 guy in Washington at the Indian Embassy is also a JNUite.
Okay.
So we do have, you know, so, and of course, you know, so to your point, but obviously JNU people are spread everywhere. So obviously people in foreign service, I don't know what message can you give them because they're seasoned, they've done this for the longest time, and no matter what their personal politics is, they ultimately are the ambassadors of India, so representing whatever government exists. But the new crop, though, is, you know, and including Jayashankar, who's our ambassador, and I was pretty impressed actually with some of the stand that they took with the Khobargade.
Yes, if I'm pronouncing the name.
So the whole episode that occurred, I mean, I personally was actually proud of the fact that Indians actually reacted the way they did, and ultimately because, you know, we have allowed that to go on too long, even though I'm a US citizen, but you know, the point is that every sovereign nation should do whatever it can to exercise its own rights, you know, and in seeking equality and parity. And you know, so I think, so I don't know what message can I give them, but, you know, but if you look at, you know, many senior level bureaucrats are people of our time, but some of them have stayed apolitical, which is a good thing. So there's one friend of ours who was an economic advisor to Manmohan Singh, and he continues to play a pretty significant role even in the current government. So because these are people who did not take political sides.
Sure.
So they have kept up their intellectual input into the process.
Have you been watching the current politics in the JNU campus, like when you were visited? Is it different than...
It is different. So no, it's different and yet it is similar. So what has happened is, so as you know, freethinkers don't exist anymore, unfortunately. So freethinkers were a non-aligned group.
Well, I still call myself freethinkers.
And so do I.
Sure.
But what has happened is, obviously, unlike our time, you have both the Congress and the BJP with their student organizations very active on the campus. So you have the AVVP and the NSUI. You remember our time, they were afraid to even announce themselves.
Exactly, yes.
And occasionally they have won an election here and there. But what has happened now is that you have a more extreme left group called ISA, All India Students Association, I think is what they stand for. They're more Marxist-Leninists, and they actually won the elections landslide this time, over the SFI. But bulk of the politics still stays pretty similar. So the left orientation is still very strong. Concern for the world as a whole is very, very strong. So that has not changed. Obviously, what has changed is that there is greater assimilation, of course, into the outside world. In our time, I think we existed as an island. Yeah, sure. So there's a little bit more, but some of the old qualities are still intact.
What happened to SFI? They're still very strong? Or?
SFI is strong, but they actually had a breakaway group a few years ago. So there is an official SFI and then there is a breakaway SFI. And that has happened in the last 2 or 3 years because of the changes at the CPM Politburo level, where actually, with Karat Prakash, when them losing elections at the national level and getting decimated, I think for one of the issues, and I forget what it was, some of the leaders basically refused to take the mandate from the Politburo, and as a result they were kicked out. So they actually formed their own. So I believe, I do not know how badly they lost, but they lost the election anyway this time. So ISA actually won all the 4.
So do you miss JNU of 70s and 80s?
I miss JNU a lot.
What is the one thing you really say, oh my God, I wish I could...
No, so JNU was great in many ways. Great. JNU, it allowed you to grow on your own. So it was, you did not have to succumb to a power authority. So I miss it, but I also sometimes I repent because I work in a corporate setting, and it is difficult, particularly in the American corporate setting. You always have to work under serious hierarchies, and JNU we expressed opinions freely. My time, 1976, you could smoke in the classroom. People were free to do what they wanted to do. So what I miss about JNU is the ease with which we interacted, the ease with which we expressed ourselves, and yet we bonded. It didn't matter what our shades of opinion. What has changed though now, and even among our friends now, some of our friends on Facebook, you express an opinion, like I posted on Facebook, and some of these guys, they'll come back and call you communist or call you anti-nationalist. So things like these, for slogans, people did that in JNU, but otherwise, after all that, you sat down, and which is why we maintained our friendships. So when I go back, I'm proud of the fact that I still have 600 or 700 people on my phone book, and when I go back, I definitely talk to a few hundred of them.
So how is you organizing this every other year, the meeting, how that has worked out, and what is the response?
That's worked out well because, the nostalgia of the old days is very, very strong. So I have the database, and we have a group of people in Delhi who basically, and elsewhere in India, who cooperate. So we have deliberately done it every other year. So we had one this year, so we'll have now in 2016. So we send out emails, we have a Facebook group, and typically, 500 to 600 people actually show up from a group that is shrinking in numbers.
Sure.
Because obviously we call it the first decade JNU, but it really is students who joined JNU till 1982. So, and every year, so we have compiled a list of people who, unfortunately, people at our age shouldn't be dying, but every year that list grows, so we maintain.
So now, since you have been in touch with most of them, or at least some of them you have followed and you have interacted with them, and as we age, our political opinion changes, and sometimes it looks odd, but when we were in JNU, we had a very clear-cut political ideology. I'm freethinker, SFI, this and that. So have you seen that some of our colleagues have also changed their ideology, and how do you feel about that?
They have. So many have. So number of things have happened. So obviously the people who belong to the SFI. So SFI, as you know, is the youth wing of CPM.
Sure.
So obviously CPM is not doing well. And the intellectual support to the leftist movement or the communist movement in India has also gone down quite a bit because, there's not much following. So you have some, so if you look at, so it's very interesting, if you look at Facebook, so if you remember one of the intellectuals from our time who was a Trotskyite was Jairus Banaji. So it's interesting when you you see a lot of our old SFI comrades who would have otherwise never ever gone anywhere near Jairus Banaji. They now actually are part of sort of one Facebook group, so to speak, and they will, a lot of them will quote Jairus Banaji. They actually, so there is that, so there's that widening, and that's quite natural because the socialist movement itself has taken a beating across. So there's a little bit of widening of the base in that sense. There are also many others who were liberal or leftist who have now gone towards the BJP side. To me, if you ask me personally, and I may be wrong, but my philosophy on this is very simple. As we grow older, to put it very crudely, we actually, as we get closer to death, we also run towards God. So our religiosity goes up. And obviously when we do that, unfortunately in the Indian context, if I'm a Hindu, then it obviously reinforces all that in the context in which I live. And that's how I end up basically becoming anti-Muslim. Not necessarily deliberately, not necessarily purposefully, because some of the same people have personal friends, one or two who may be Muslims. But if you look at their public pronouncements, their attitude is that if there is a terrorism somewhere, it is going to be a Muslim. And that attitude is very, very clear. So age obviously does that to you.
Sure.
I mean, so that's how, I don't know if you remember 1983 in JNU when there was a big crackdown on the student movement.
I remember that. Yeah.
Lot of faculty members who otherwise were left-oriented, they became supportive of the government. This was Indira Gandhi's. She was still alive. Yes, 1983. So this was a big crackdown. But most of the old leftist faculty actually supported the government in the crackdown. And in my perception, it was largely a play of one thing only, which is they had all reached their middle age, or they were about our age at that time, and all their children, most of their children were deviants. They did ganja, they did bhang, whatever it is. So I think certainly they were dealing with a population of children that they could not control, and so their midlife socialization, early career socialization in leftism gave way partially to pro-authority because suddenly they were confronted with their own lives where they couldn't take this deviance anymore.
Sure. Now, you were not ready for this, but I'm going to ask you. I know that you said that freethinkers no longer exist at the JNU campus, but I'm sure that there are a lot of freethinkers still, and still believe in that. I am the one hard, a freethinker. So if you have to give one message to freethinkers, I'm sure many of them will be watching this. What will that message be to the freethinkers today?
Look, free thinking, in my perception, is a difficult political philosophy to continue with. And I'm glad that you call yourself a free thinker, because obviously it requires that courage of conviction that you should be able to see things for what it is. So if you have a great Modi rally, you will recognize it as a good rally. Then you will go on to analyze for what went behind it. But you can't take away from people, what it was. So free thinking requires both sides. I may personally be an atheist, but that does not mean that I do not support people who are believers, as long as they are not destructive. So my message to my free thinkers, of course, if anyone in India is listening, if I had my way, I would actually go back to JNU campus and I'll try to reorganize a group of free thinkers, because ultimately,
that's a great idea, actually.
I have said this to a number of friends, a number of times, that and I'm sure if someone spends a week or two, they should be able to get a group together, because
that's a great idea, actually.
Sure. Because my message will be, many of them have begun retiring, so they live in Delhi. So I would say, if you're listening,
absolutely, great idea. I can volunteer to help from here too. Yes. Now, this is again a surprise for you. What will be your one message to our colleagues from SFI? I remember those debates.
My message to them will be to widen their base. So I would say that, give up, or tone down your old rhetoric. So you can't talk about the old Marxian terminology, but socialism, or equality for all, or wealth redistribution, I think still is meaningful. I mean, as we know what has happened in India particularly, no matter how much you fight liberalism, you really cannot fight given where the world economy is, because you are now pushed into a world economic order. So things that you can fight, you cannot fight. But within what you have, you should actually adapt. And when you adapt, so why can't we fight for the fact that we have a constitution in India which is socialistic,
sure,
by definition. So why can't you talk about salary caps on CEOs, for example? Something that you can't do in the US, but you can easily do that in India. So you do not need the unions of the same kind, but you can reorganize the union so that obviously if there's inefficiency in banks, you should be able to fight that so that people become more efficient, but yet you can carry on the old tradition of helping people organize themselves. So I would say same thing with reservations. Do we need to continue with same kind of reservations that we have had in India? In many instances, probably not. I mean, I have a bunch of friends who came through reservations, but they are senior bank officials, they are senior IAS officers. Do their children really need to have a reservation? They don't.
Sure.
So these are debates that they need to get into, and they need to find a solution rather than keep renewing what we have. And that's part of the reason why they are in the state that they are in, because they have marginalized themselves completely.
So we started our conversation with Mr. Modi. We want to end it with that. So what is your last word for Mr. Modi?
No, my last word, look, I mean, we want country to do well. We don't have an unlimited amount of time to experiment. India, we have suffered in the last 15, 20 years because of great regionalism that has gone on. Mr. Modi has a fantastic mandate at the national level. So this is one chance that a party has been given in a long time in India, where they can attempt to do something which will benefit the country as a whole. Part of the reason we have had huge corruption in India is that because of the factionalism and fractions and regionalism that has existed in India, all the governments have to compromise. So when you compromise and you take one guy, and I'll give you one great example of I come from Jharkhand, and Madhu Kola was the chief minister of Jharkhand. He led a group of 5 independents, and the UPA did not want the BJP to form government, so they actually let them be part of the UPA in Jharkhand. Madhu Kola became the chief minister. 2 years, 4,000 crores is what he embezzled. He's in jail, but what I'm saying is that things like these have occurred because of this. So my message to Mr. Modi is, if you can keep away from communal agenda and focus on country's development, ultimately it will do his party well, and it will do everybody else well.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tibrewal. Nice to see you again.